For 37 minutes, the world held its breath. It was a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight, pressing down on the streets of New York City, quieting the usual cacophony of traffic and life to a reverent, terrified hum. On every screen, on every device across the globe, the image was the same, a silent, silver teardrop of a ship, hanging motionless over the United Nations headquarters. It didn't drift. It didn't wobble. It was fixed in the sky as if painted there, a thing of impossible grace and alien geometry that defied every law of physics humanity had ever discovered. No communications. No demands. No threatening energy signatures. Just presence. Fighter jets had scrambled, of course. F-35s and Su-57s, the pinnacle of human aerial engineering, had screamed towards the object, only to be humbled. The alien craft didn't even seem to move, the jets simply found themselves flying past it, their most aggressive maneuvers resulting in nothing, their pilots reporting that the ship was somehow just not where they were aiming anymore. They were like angry wasps trying to sting a ghost. On the ground, at the hastily formed perimeter, Commander Eva Rostova stood with the unyielding calm of someone who'd grown up under the wide, hot Texas sky, her hand resting on the grip of her sidearm. It was a comforting, familiar weight in a world that had suddenly become terrifyingly unfamiliar. At 38, she had spent half her life in military service, rising through the ranks to lead the newly formed First Contact Response Unit. It was a post most of her colleagues considered a career dead end, a theoretical exercise for a scenario that would never happen. Now, this was the moment she had trained her entire life for, the moment humanity would learn it was not alone. The silence stretched, each second a lifetime. The world watched. The world waited. And when that ship finally opened, a seamless line appearing in its flawless hull and widening into a soft, glowing oval, it wasn't an invasion that stepped out. It was a plea. Two slender, violet-skinned figures emerged into the harsh light of an Earth afternoon, their four golden eyes blinking in a disquieting rhythm. They raised their six-fingered hands in a gesture that was, miraculously, universal. A single cry for help that was about to change the course of human history forever. They had come to our violent, chaotic little world seeking warriors. They had no idea they had just knocked on the door of a death world. 3 centuries. For 300 years, the Celian Collective had watched us. From their silent, hidden observation post, a marvel of engineering disguised as an unremarkable asteroid in the outer orbits beyond Neptune, they had documented our story. Their home was Salus Prime, a world that had known unbroken peace for 10,000 years, a world where the concept of organized violence was a philosophical abstraction, like a unicorn or a dragon. From this serene vantage point, they charted humanity's every bloody triumph and heartbreaking failure with the meticulous, detached precision of scientists observing a particularly fascinating ant farm. They watched as we waged world wars of unimaginable devastation, turning continents into graveyards over ideologies and borders. And then they watched, in what their records called the Great Paradox, as we rose from those ashes to build alliances and institutions of unprecedented cooperation. They saw our tentative first steps into space, our clumsy rockets and fragile satellites, and they felt a parental sort of pride. They marveled at our relentless, chaotic, and utterly brilliant technological innovation. Most importantly, they studied our nature, a confounding duality that their logical, peaceful minds struggled to reconcile. On that observation post, just days before their fateful journey to Earth, 2 of their most senior figures stood before a vast, holographic projection of our world. Ambassador Lyra, a diplomat whose voice could calm nebulas, glided her long, 6-fingered hand over the display, which showed footage of Earth's latest military exercises. Tanks thundered across a desert, fighter jets painted the sky with contrails, and soldiers practiced their deadly craft. Their art reaches for the divine, she said, her voice a low, melodic hum, filled with a deep, ancient sadness. They compose symphonies that can make a stone weep, and they write poetry that captures the essence of love. Yet, with the same minds and hands, they build these machines designed for the sole purpose of immense, efficient destruction. I still say this is a mistake, Orion. We are asking the fire to save us from the flood. High Commander Orion, whose title was a recent and uncomfortable invention, stood beside her. His frame was larger, his presence more grounded. His 4 golden eyes, the mark of a Celian elder, blinked in a slow, resolute sequencia sign of unshakable determination. Lyra, we are out of choices. The Vex advance fleet was detected crossing the Cygnus threshold yesterday. Our best projections, the ones that don't account for their usual ruthless speed, give us 6 standard cycles. 6 of your months. Then they will be at Salus Prime. He gestured to the blue-green marble hanging in the space between them. You've studied their history as I have. Humans, they are warriors. It is written into their DNA, into their very bones. They have predators' eyes, even the gentlest of them. It is a state of being our species never evolved to be. And that is precisely what terrifies me, Lyra countered, her shimmering lavender skin seeming to dim with her anxiety. Their history is a river of blood, Orion, flowing from one war to the next. If we reveal ourselves and request their aid, what guarantee do we have that they won't simply see us as a new resource to be exploited? A new target? What if they see our technology, our defenselessness, and simply destroy us themselves? Orion turned his full attention from the hologram to his old friend, his golden gaze softening slightly. Because for all their violence, for all their tribalism and their tragic history, they possess something the Vex will never, ever understand. Compassion. Our archives are filled with it. When faced with suffering, humans often intervene. They run into burning buildings for strangers. They cross oceans to offer aid after a natural disaster. They sacrifice themselves for causes greater than their own individual survival. It's a paradox, a glorious, illogical, maddening paradox, and Lyra, it's our only hope. 3 days later, their sleek diplomatic vessel, the Hope's Journey, broke through Earth's atmosphere. It triggered every defense system on the planet. Worldwide alerts blared. Television broadcasts of game shows and soap operas were cut short, replaced by stunned news anchors with shaky hands. Social media exploded into a supernova of grainy cell phone footage and wild speculation. Militaries around the globe scrambled their best fighter jets, which proved to be hopelessly, embarrassingly outmatched by the alien craft's silent, effortless maneuverability. The ship descended with a grace that was almost painful to watch, settling on the expansive lawn of the United Nations headquarters in New York like a falling petal. And then, the silence. For 37 excruciating minutes, nothing happened. No hatch opened. No communication was received. The world held its collective breath, a planet of 7 billion people united in a single moment of awe and terror. Commander Eva Rostova stood at the perimeter, her dark eyes never leaving the silver vessel. At 38, Rostova had spent half her life in military service. She was born and raised in the hill country outside of Austin, Texas, and carried with her a pragmatism as wide and unyielding as the Texas sky. She'd risen through the ranks to lead the First Contact Response Unit, a position created by a UN resolution that most considered a joke. This was the moment she had trained for, a moment she never truly believed would come. Anything? She asked the communications specialist beside her, her voice a low, steady command that cut through the tension. Nothing, Commander, the specialist replied, sweat beading on his forehead. No radio, no microwaves, no electromagnetic signals of any kind. It's like it's not even there, electronically speaking. Rostova gave a curt nod, her hand resting instinctively on her sidearm. Maintain position. Be ready for anything. Then, it happened. A seam, invisible a moment before, appeared in the seamless hull of the craft. It widened silently into an oval opening, spilling a soft, warm light that momentarily blinded the assembled soldiers and dignitaries. When Rostova's vision cleared, she saw them. 2 humanoid figures, taller and more slender than any human, with violet skin that seemed to shimmer iridescently in the sunlight. 4 large, luminous golden eyes dominated their narrow faces, blinking in that unsettling, sequential pattern. The taller of the two, Orion, stepped forward, raising his empty, six-fingered hands in what appeared to be a universal gesture of peace. And then he spoke, his voice resonating with an almost musical quality, in perfect, unaccented English. People of Earth. I am Ambassador Lyra of the Celian Collective, the other figure corrected gently, her voice weaving through the tense air. We come seeking your help. 4 hours later, Eva Rostova sat in a secured conference room deep beneath the UN building, a sterile, windowless box designed to withstand a direct nuclear strike. She was watching the alien ambassador address the Emergency Security Council. President Harrison of the United States sat to her right, his face an impassive political mask, but his knuckles were bone-white as he gripped his pen. We have observed your species for many years, Lyra explained, her movements graceful and precise, a stark contrast to the rigid, uniformed humans around her. We hoped never to reveal ourselves, to allow your natural development to proceed uninterrupted. But dire circumstances have forced our hand. Ambassador Lyra activated a small device on her wrist. A three-dimensional hologram materialized in the center of the room, so real it seemed to suck the air out of the space. It showed a creature of pure nightmare. It was reptilian, standing over 8 feet tall on powerful, digitigrade legs. Its body was covered in a natural, armored exoskeleton that looked like sharpened obsidian. Its powerful limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and its elongated skull was crowned with a series of bony crests. It was a monster from a fever dream, a being that looked like it was designed by nature for the sole purpose of killing. The Vex Dominion, Lyra continued, her voice steady despite the horror of the image. They have conquered 17 civilizations in this galactic arm in the past century alone. Their philosophy is simple: they consume resources, enslave populations for labor, and utterly eradicate all resistance. They are a plague, spreading through the galaxy. Her 4 eyes, full of a sorrow that felt ancient, met the gazes of the human leaders. They are now approaching Celian space. Our scientists estimate they will reach our home world, Salus Prime, within 6 of your months. The Chinese representative, a stern man named General Wei, leaned into his microphone. His voice was sharp with skepticism. And you want us to fight them for you? Lyra's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of Celian distress. The Celian people evolved as a cooperative species. We excel in science, medicine, agriculture, art, but we lack the capacity for effective warfare. In all of our recorded history, we have never once developed a weapon designed to kill another sentient being. But you want us to kill for you, Rostova said, speaking for the first time since the introductions. Her voice was quiet but cut through the room like a razor. It wasn't an accusation, it was a clarification. The alien turned her 4 golden eyes toward Rostova, her expression unreadable. No, Commander. We want you to teach us to defend ourselves. President Harrison leaned forward, his voice a low rumble. With all due respect, Ambassador, your technology is clearly centuries beyond ours. Your ship alone demonstrates capabilities our greatest minds have only theorized about. What could we possibly teach you? For the first time, High Commander Orion spoke, his deeper voice reverberating through the room. Technology is not everything, Mr. President. The Vex possess advanced technology as well. But your species has something that neither the Vex nor the Celians possess. A quality our researchers have struggled to name. The closest translation would be the warrior spirit. Lyra's hologram shifted, and now it showed a rapid-fire montage of human history. Roman legions marching in perfect, disciplined formations. Samurai warriors in single combat, their blades a blur of deadly grace. Knights in heavy armor charging across a muddy field. And then, modern special forces, executing a nighttime raid with brutal, terrifying efficiency. Your entire evolution has been shaped by conflict, Orion explained, his voice a somber lecture. You prepare for war even in times of profound peace. You develop strategies, contingencies, weapons. Your entertainment, your literature, your children's games all contain elements of combat and strategic thinking. You have been preparing for a galactic war for thousands of years, you just didn't know it. The Russian president, a man with a face like carved granite, scowled. You've been spying on us, he said, his tone dark and accusatory. We have been studying you, Orion corrected gently. And what we have learned is that when humanity is threatened, when your backs are against the wall, you fight with a ferocity and a terrifying ingenuity that is unmatched in our experience. The Vex conquer through overwhelming force, throwing their fleets against species that don't know how to resist. We believe you do. The hologram changed again. The historical footage was replaced by something current, and far more horrific. The images were raw, unfiltered. Celian cities, elegant and spiraling, were burning under an alien sky. Violet-skinned civilians, beings who looked exactly like Lyra and Orion, were being herded into crude, barbed wire camps by the hulking Vex warriors. There were scenes of systematic executions, carried out with cold, reptilian indifference. Many of the human representatives in the room, hardened politicians and military leaders, turned away, unable to watch. This is happening now. On our outer colonies, Lyra said, her melodic voice now a choked, soft whisper. Soon, it will be our home world. And after they are finished with us they will find you. The Vex do not stop. Commander Rostova didn't look away. She watched the holographic images, her military mind overriding her revulsion. She was already analyzing Vex tactics, noting their formations, their weapon dispersal, identifying weaknesses in their arrogance. How many colonies have you lost? She asked, her voice still steady. 3, Orion answered, his voice heavy. Approximately 4 million Kelians are currently under Vex control. Or were. Rostova looked at President Harrison. Sir, even if we decide to help, this isn't just a US decision. We'd need global cooperation on a scale we've never, ever achieved. Not even during the World Wars. Harrison nodded grimly. I understand, Commander. He turned back to the alien representatives. We'll need time to discuss this among ourselves. And we'll need more information. Everything you have on these Vex. Their ship schematics, their weapons capabilities, their command structure, their tactics, any known vulnerabilities. Everything. Of course, Lyra said, her musical voice tinged with what might have been the first glimmer of hope. But please, understand. Time is not abundant. The debate that followed was a firestorm that consumed the planet for 3 agonizing days. It raged in the hallowed halls of the United Nations, on every 24-hour news channel, in every bar, and around every dinner table. Military advisors argued passionately that engaging in an alien conflict would be suicide, a catastrophic diversion of resources needed for Earth's own defense. They pointed to the Vex hologram and spoke of unwinnable wars against a technologically superior foe. Scientists, on the other hand, salivated at the mere thought of the potential technological advances. Cooperation with the Kelians, they argued, could leapfrog human progress by 1,000 years, offering cures for diseases, limitless clean energy, and the secrets to faster-than-light travel. Religious leaders questioned the moral implications, debating whether humanity had the right to become arms dealers and military trainers for an interstellar war. And on the fringes, the conspiracy theorists went into overdrive. The entire situation, they screamed online, was a fabrication. A deep fake on a global scale. Either the Kelians themselves were the true threat, using a sob story to lower Earth's defenses, or no aliens existed at all, and the world's governments were using impossibly advanced holograms to justify a massive increase in military spending and global control. Through it all, Commander Rostova and her newly formed Joint Task Force worked. They ignored the political noise and worked directly with the Celian representatives, turning a secure sublevel of the Pentagon into a nexus of interspecies exchange. They learned everything they could about the enemy they might soon face. Their primary tactic is overwhelming force, Orion explained, his 6-fingered hands manipulating a holographic display of Vex battle formations. The red icons of their ships moved in rigid, predictable patterns. They have never needed to develop complex strategies because their technological and numerical advantage has always been sufficient. They punch through enemy defenses like a hammer through glass. Rostova studied the patterns, her eyes narrowed in concentration. She saw it almost immediately. "They're predictable," she murmured, more to herself than to the alien commander. "Arrogant. They lead with their command ships, assuming they are invulnerable. They don't protect their flanks. They have never faced a species that could truly challenge them," Lyra confirmed, her voice soft. While the generals and politicians debated, Rostova's team was building a different kind of case. In a cavernous hangar bay at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, a Celian shuttle, a gift for analysis, was being swarmed by human engineers. They moved with a predatory curiosity, their faces a mixture of awe and calculation. The Celian engineers who had accompanied the shuttle watched them, their 4 golden eyes wide with a growing sense of horror. A grizzled Air Force gunnery sergeant named Gunny Miller, a man with more grease under his fingernails than blood in his veins, was arguing with a young Celian technician. "But this is a geological resonance scanner," the Celian protested, his voice high with agitation. "It is designed to map crustal densities and find water deposits on barren moons. You cannot simply reroute the primary power core and recollimate the emitter matrix to turn it into a weapon." Gunny Miller wiped his hands on an already filthy rag, a wide smirk spreading across his face. "Son, listen to me. Anything with a power core can be a weapon. You just gotta have the imagination for it. We're not just gonna tune this thing to find water. We're gonna tune it to find the specific resonant frequency of Vex ship hulls. Then we're gonna crank it up to 11 and make them shake apart like a cheap tin can in a Texas hurricane." The Celian looked physically ill. A few hundred feet away, in a converted cargo bay filled with holographic displays, the situation was even more intense. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, a brilliant young strategist from MIT, stood surrounded by swirling combat scenarios. High Commander Orion stood with her, his 4 golden eyes tracking the simulated movements with growing astonishment and dismay. "You are deliberately sacrificing vessels to create openings," he observed, his deep voice tinged with horror as he watched 2 blue icons deliberately overload their engines and fly into a cluster of red ones. These would be ships with crews aboard. With lives. Rodriguez, without looking away from the swirling chaos of light, adjusted a parameter. "In these specific scenarios, yes, Commander. But those losses 2 ships, maybe 3,000 crew would save the other 10 ships in the fleet and the 50,000 souls on them. It would also allow us to take out their command vessel, effectively ending the battle. War always involves sacrifice. It's a scale. You have to weigh the lives you can't save against the ones you can." The Celian mind could never think this way, Orion admitted quietly, a profound sadness in his voice. "To us, every life is sacred. We would never choose to sacrifice one. Perhaps this is why we have always been vulnerable to species like the Vex. It's not just about being willing to sacrifice," Rodriguez explained, her tone patient but firm, like a teacher explaining a difficult concept. She shifted the holographic display, showing an alternate approach. "It's about understanding when sacrifice is necessary and when it's just wasteful. It's about making your enemy pay an impossible price for every inch of ground, for every life they take. It's about making the math of fighting you so ugly, so costly, that they decide the fight isn't worth it. That's deterrence. That's how you win a war before it even starts." On the 4th day, the United Nations Security Council voted. The world watched, breathless. And with surprising, almost shocking unity, Earth agreed to help. Not with troops, not initially. But with military advisors, tactical training, and strategic planning. Humanity would become the galaxy's deadliest teachers. In exchange, the Kelians would share specific technological advances, particularly in medicine, renewable energy, and, most importantly, the secrets of their faster-than-light drives. When Commander Rostova delivered the news, Ambassador Lyra's 4 eyes glistened with a moisture that looked remarkably like tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You have given my people hope where there was none." But High Commander Orion seemed troubled, his gaze distant. "Commander Rostova," he said, his voice heavy with foreboding. "I fear you may not fully understand what you are committing to. The Vex will not distinguish between Celian and human once you are involved. They will see your entire species as enemies. They will bring a fire to your world that you cannot imagine." Rostova met his 4-eyed gaze steadily, her own eyes like chips of flint. "With all due respect, Commander, I don't think you understand what humanity is committing to either. Where I'm from, we have a saying, don't mess with Texas. Well, the Vex just messed with Earth. When we go to war, we don't do it halfway. They've picked a fight with a sleeping bear. We're going to finish it." 1 month later, the orbital shipyards above Mars hummed with an unprecedented, feverish activity. What had once been nascent habitation modules for the first human Mars colony, a peaceful project of exploration, were being rapidly and brutally converted into military vessels. It was a perfect metaphor for humanity's new role in the galaxy. A hybrid of rugged, reliable human engineering and elegant, advanced Celian technology was giving birth to a new class of warship. Colonel Sophia Chen, formerly of the Chinese People's Liberation Army Space Force, floated through the central corridor of what would soon be the flagship of humanity's first interstellar fleet, the EDF Defiance. At 38, Chen was a woman forged in discipline and pragmatism. She had never imagined she would command a starship, let alone lead humans into battle against a hostile alien threat. Yet here she was, overseeing the final installation of massive magnetic accelerator cannons and advanced missile systems onto a vessel designed with Celian faster-than-light technology. "The targeting systems are integrating well with the Celian long-range sensors, Colonel," reported her chief engineer, Dr. Kwame Okafor, his voice crackling over the comm. "We can target a Vex ship's exhaust port from a light minute away. But we're still having power regulation issues with the main weapons array when we try to fire in rapid succession. The Celian power conduits weren't designed for such violent energy surges." Chen nodded, her expression serious as she watched a team of welders seal a new armor plate onto the bridge section. "How long until it's fully operational?" 3 days, maybe 4 if we don't want it to melt after the first major engagement," Kwame replied. "The Celian engineers are concerned about our modifications. I believe one of them used the term barbaric. Chen almost smiled. The Kelians had been horrified when they realized how quickly and instinctively humans had weaponized their peaceful technology. Where the aliens saw transport vessels and scientific instruments, human engineers saw potential weapons platforms and tactical advantages. It had taken considerable diplomatic effort from Commander Rostova to convince the Celian leadership that these barbaric modifications were not just necessary, but essential for survival. "They'll understand when we face the Vex," Chen said simply. "Speaking of which, where are we on the final battle simulations?" "Lieutenant Rodriguez is running them now, ma'am. Initial results are promising." In a converted cargo bay on the station, now known as the War Room, Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez stood surrounded by a dizzying array of holographic displays showing various combat scenarios. With her was High Commander Orion, who watched the simulated movements with growing astonishment. "Your ships fight with a decentralized command structure," Orion observed, his voice a mixture of confusion and awe. "Each strike group acts independently, yet they support each other. How do they maintain cohesion without a central fleet commander directing every move?" "Mission-type tactics," Rodriguez explained, her fingers flying across a console as she adjusted variables. "We give our squadron commanders the objective, the intelligence, and the rules of engagement. We trust them to figure out the how. It makes us faster, more adaptable. The Vex command is rigid, top-down. If you cut the head off the snake, the body thrashes and dies. Our forces are more like a swarm of hornets. You can swat one, but the rest are still coming for you." The simulation reset, and this time, the human fleet executed a daring maneuver. "Here," Rodriguez said, pointing. "We're deliberately sacrificing this destroyer to draw their heavy cruisers into a kill box. The destroyer's last act will be to detonate its reactor core, disabling the cruiser's shields for 4.7 seconds. In that window, our railgun platforms will gut them." Orion's golden eyes widened in horror. "You speak of it so clinically. That destroyer would have a crew of over 500. And their sacrifice, a sacrifice they would willingly make, will prevent those 3 heavy cruisers from glassing a city of millions on the planet below," Rodriguez countered, her gaze unwavering. "This is the ugly math of war, Commander. You taught us we were warriors. This is what it looks like." At that moment, alarms blared throughout the station, a shrill, urgent cry that cut through the low hum of the life support systems. Rodriguez's comm unit crackled to life with Colonel Chen's voice, sharp and clear. "Battle stations. Vex scout vessels detected near Jupiter's orbit. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." The first engagement between humanity and the Vex was brief, brutal, and decisive. 3 human vessels, the Stalwart, the Tireless, and the Audacity, were still undergoing final systems checks when the alert came. They intercepted the 3 Vex scout ships before they could gather any significant intelligence on Earth's newly fortified defenses. The reptilian aliens, accustomed to facing technologically inferior or completely non-militant species, were utterly unprepared for the ferocity and sheer aggression of the human attack. "They never expected us to strike first," Colonel Chen reported during the emergency briefing held just hours later, the combat footage playing on the main screen behind her. "Their shields were calibrated for directed energy weapons, the kind the Keelians use. Our kinetic weapons, those heavy tungsten projectiles from the railguns, went right through their defenses like a bullet through wet paper." Commander Rostova studied the battle footage, her analytical mind noting the visible confusion in the Vex maneuvers. "They scattered, their response chaotic. They had no contingency for an enemy that charged headlong into a fight. Did we secure any intelligence from the wreckage?" "Limited data from their navigational systems before the ships were destroyed," Chen confirmed, pulling up a star chart. "But it was enough. We've confirmed the location of the nearest Vex-occupied Celian colony. A world called Hellas 4. Ambassador Lyra, who had been watching silently until now, stepped forward. "Hellas 4, she breathed, her voice filled with pain. "It was one of our primary agricultural worlds. There are over 800,000 Celian civilians there. The Vex converted our scientific and hydroponic facilities into military installations and labor camps. Then that's our first target," Rostova decided instantly, the room falling silent. She turned to Chen. "Colonel, how soon can your fleet be ready?" "The flagship Defiance and 4 support vessels can deploy in 72 hours. The rest of the fleet will need at least 2 more weeks to be fully combat ready." "That's not enough," Orion protested, his voice urgent. "Our intelligence on Hellas 4, though dated, suggests the Vex fleet there has at least 15 warships. They will outnumber you 3 to 1. Rostova met his golden gaze, her own eyes steady and resolute. "Quality over quantity, Commander. Trust us. It's time to show the Vex what happens when you poke a hornet's nest." 3 days later, 5 human vessels, equipped with the new Celian human hybrid FTL drives, departed the solar system. The Earth Expeditionary Force, crewed by a diverse, hand-picked collection of the best soldiers from 27 different nations, embarked on humanity's first interstellar military operation. Colonel Chen stood on the bridge of the EDF Defiance, a silent, imposing figure watching as the stars outside the viewscreen blurred into long streaks of light. "Transit time to Hellas 4, she asked, her voice calm. 17 hours, Colonel," her navigation officer reported. Chen nodded. "Maintain stealth protocols. Inform all crew to prepare for combat operations upon arrival." Behind her, Ambassador Lyra stood as an observer, her slender frame a stark contrast to the armored human marines manning the bridge stations. She was a picture of mixed hope and trepidation. "What you're attempting has never been done before," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "No species has ever successfully liberated a world from Vex control." Chen replied without turning, her eyes fixed on the warping starfield ahead. "First time for everything, Ambassador. You came to Earth looking for warriors. That's what you're getting." The Vex occupation force on Hellas 4 had grown complacent. After easily subjugating the pacifistic Celian population, they had established a dull routine of resource extraction and military fortification. The reptilian commander, Sub-Hierarch Drex, a veteran of a dozen such planetary conquests, had even begun to consider this posting somewhat beneath his capabilities. There was no glory in controlling a population that offered no resistance, no thrill in ruling over a world that had surrendered without a single shot fired. That all changed when 5 unidentified vessels suddenly appeared in high orbit and immediately, without any warning or preamble, launched what could only be described as an all-out, suicidal assault. Unknown vessels attacking primary defense installations, his sensor operator reported, panic evident in his hissing voice. The bridge was thrown into chaos. Our orbital defense platforms are already disabled. Their weapon impacts, they are not energy-based. They are bypassing our shields. Drex rose from his command throne, the bony crest on his skull extending in agitation. Impossible. How did they get so close undetected? Deploy the fleet. Activate the planetary shields. But the human attack had been meticulously, brutally planned. Before the Vex fleet could even organize a coordinated response, precision strikes from the human ships had already disabled their shield generators on the ground. At the same time, sleek, black dropships streaked through the atmosphere like vengeful meteors, carrying special forces teams to key strategic locations across the planet. Captain Malik Ibrahim, a stoic former Egyptian commando, led his multinational squad, Wraith team, toward the largest detention facility. He moved with practiced efficiency through the alien landscape, the purple foliage and strange rock formations bathed in the light of a binary sun. His enhanced combat suit, a product of the new Joint Tech program, allowed him to carry heavier weapons and move faster than would normally be possible. "Remember," he told his team over their secure tactical channel, his voice a comm center in the storm, "Priority 1 is liberating the Celian prisoners. Engage Vex forces only when necessary to achieve the objective. Minimize collateral damage." Their Celian advisor, a young scientist named Salari who had been born on Hellas 4, moved awkwardly beside them in her hastily constructed combat gear. "The main control center for the detention block should be just ahead, beyond that crystalline structure," she whispered, pointing with a trembling, 6-fingered hand. Ibrahim signaled his team to halt, then deployed a small, dragonfly-like reconnaissance drone. The tiny device skimmed silently overhead, transmitting real-time imagery of heavily armed Vex guards to the heads-up display in Ibrahim's helmet. 6 targets, standard patrol formation, Ibrahim observed. "They're still clueless. They think the explosions are a meteor shower." One of his squad members, a former Russian Spetsnaz operative named Anya, checked her weapon. "Their armor looks thickest at the chest and head, Captain. Targeting recommendations. Joint areas: knees, elbows, neck and the underside of the jaw," Ibrahim replied, recalling the detailed anatomical briefings they'd received from Celian medical experts. "Anya, Harris, you take flanking positions. We take them all down simultaneously on my mark. No alarms. 3, 2, 1 mark." The skirmish lasted less than 30 seconds. It was a silent, deadly ballet. The Vex guards, despite their natural armor and imposing 8-foot-tall physiology, fell to precisely targeted kinetic rounds before they could even process the attack and raise an alarm. As Ibrahim's team secured the entrance, he couldn't help but notice Salari's expression of profound shock. You killed them so efficiently," she whispered, her 4 golden eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. Ibrahim was already checking his tactical display, his mind focused on the next objective inside the prison. "That's what we do," he said, his tone not unkind, but utterly pragmatic. Across the colony, similar scenes played out as human special forces teams systematically dismantled the Vex occupation infrastructure with terrifying speed. In orbit, Colonel Chen's 5 small vessels executed a complex, three-dimensional ballet of maneuvers that confused and divided the numerically superior Vex fleet. "They keep trying to form up in their standard defensive formations," Chen noted coolly as she watched the tactical display on the Defiance's bridge. "They have no adaptation to our hit-and-run tactics." Her tactical officer, a young prodigy from the Indian Space Research Organization, nodded in agreement. "They're fighting by the book, ma'am. A book written for enemies that flee, not for enemies that press the attack from all sides at once." "Exploit their predictability," Chen ordered. "Continue targeting their command vessels. Let's keep cutting the heads off their snakes." By the time Sub-Hierarch Drex realized the true nature of the threat he faced, his command center was already surrounded. The reinforced doors to his chamber burst inward from a directed explosive charge, and human soldiers poured in, weapons trained on him and his terrified staff. Captain Ibrahim entered last, his dark eyes scanning the room before focusing on the Vex commander on his throne. "Sub-Hierarch Drex," he stated, his voice calm and authoritative. "Your forces on this planet are defeated. Your fleet is in ruins. Surrender now, or be destroyed." Drex's reptilian features contorted in what might have been disbelief or pure rage. What manner of species are you?" he hissed, his voice a guttural rasp. "The Keelians are weak, passive. They could not have created warriors like you." "They didn't," Ibrahim replied simply, his rifle never wavering. "We're human. And you should tell your masters we're just getting started." Within 26 hours of the human fleet's arrival, Hellas 4 was secured. The Vex occupation force had been decisively and utterly defeated, with over 2,000 taken prisoner and the remainder either killed in combat or having fled in the few damaged ships that managed to escape the orbital meat grinder. More importantly, 798,234 Celian civilians were liberated. They rushed from their prisons and labor camps, many of them embracing their armored human rescuers with all 4 of their arms, tears of disbelief and gratitude streaming from their golden eyes. Ambassador Lyra walked through the main settlement with Commander Rostova, who had arrived on a fast transport once the fighting had concluded. The Celian was still struggling to process what she had witnessed. "In a single day," she murmured, her voice filled with awe, "you accomplished what my people thought impossible. You gave us back our world." "This was just one colony, Lyra," Rostova cautioned, her eyes scanning the celebrating crowds and the grim-faced human soldiers standing guard. "The Vex will not take this lightly. They will respond. And they will respond with everything they have." "Let them come," Colonel Chen said, joining them. She had just overseen the transfer of captured Vex technology and prisoners. "Every engagement teaches us more about how they fight. And, more importantly, how they don't. We have their databanks, their tactical manuals, and living prisoners to interrogate. They have rumors and a bloody nose." The news of the humiliating defeat at Hellas 4 spread like a shockwave through the Vex Dominion's communications network. In the massive, city-sized high ship that served as the mobile headquarters of the entire Dominion, High Hierarch Zavik, the supreme commander of the Vex military, summoned his war council. "These humans," he rumbled, the Vex translator device struggling to pronounce the unfamiliar word. The sound came out as a harsh hiss. "They fight unlike any species we have ever encountered. Show me their home world." A hologram appeared in the center of the dark chamber, displaying Earth's peaceful, blue-green sphere. One of the council members, a scarred, ancient veteran of 100 conquests, leaned forward. "Their technology is inferior to ours in many respects, High Hierarch. But they have adapted Celian advances with a remarkable, almost unnatural speed. More concerning is their tactical approach. It is aggressive, unpredictable, and they seem willing to accept casualties to achieve strategic objectives. They are inefficient, but terrifyingly effective." "They are savages," another counselor hissed dismissively. Savages who defeated one of our fully garrisoned occupation forces in less than a single planetary rotation, Zavik corrected sharply, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Savages who now possess our tactical data, our ship schematics, and prisoners for interrogation. His clawed hand sliced through the holographic image of Earth. Divert the 3rd and 4th assault fleets from the Cygnus campaign. Find their home world. These humans must be exterminated, root and stem, before their poisonous ideology of resistance spreads further. Back on Earth, the newly christened United Nations Interstellar Defense Council met in an emergency session that lasted for 3 straight days. The victory at Hellas 4 had electrified the planet, turning soldiers like Colonel Chen and Captain Ibrahim into global heroes overnight. But behind the scenes, military strategists were preparing for the inevitable, massive Vex response. Our intelligence, confirmed by the Celians' long-range sensors and analysis of the captured Vex data, suggests they're redirecting 2 full assault fleets toward our solar system, Commander Rostova reported, her face grim. Our current fleet of 20 ships, even with the new ones coming online, can't stop them all. Not in open space. President Harrison frowned, the lines on his face deepening. How long do we have? 2 weeks. Maybe 3 if they encounter unexpected stellar phenomena, Rostova replied. We need to accelerate production of combat vessels and prepare Earth's planetary defenses for a full-scale invasion. What about the Celian technology? The French representative asked. The shields, the FTL drives. Can we implement those on a planetary scale? Create a shield around the entire Earth? High Commander Orion, now a permanent member of the Council, shook his head. The power requirements would be astronomical, far beyond your planet's current output. And the engineering challenge, it would take years, not weeks. But, he paused, activating a new holographic display. There may be another solution. The display showed a massive, partially constructed space installation. It was a ring of incredible size, dotted with advanced sensor arrays and power conduits. This is the Sentinel Array, Orion explained. It was to be our most advanced deep space observatory and defensive platform. It was being constructed in orbit around Salus Prime when the Vex first attacked. It's nearly complete, but it lacks an effective offensive capability. Our weapons are designed to disable, not destroy. It lacks teeth. Something your engineers could certainly provide. Rostova studied the schematics, her mind racing, a spark of an idea igniting in her eyes. If we could use our new FTL tugs to move this entire structure, position it between Earth and the anticipated Vex approach vector. Exactly, Orion confirmed. Its shield generator alone is powerful enough to protect a small planet. Combined with your fleet and your unique approach to weaponization, it could turn the tide. As the terrifying and audacious plan was formulated, humanity prepared for war on a scale never before imagined. The planet transformed. Factories that once built cars now churned out armor plating and munitions. Civilian space freighters were retrofitted with railguns and missile pods. Troops from every nation trained relentlessly in zero-G combat and anti-boarding techniques. The Celians, witnessing this global transformation with a mixture of awe and growing alarm, began to fully understand what they had unleashed. They're not just fighting for us anymore, are they? Ambassador Lyra observed quietly to Orion, as they watched massive transport ships being loaded with tanks and mobile artillery at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. No, Orion replied, his gaze fixed on the determined faces of the young human soldiers. They're fighting for themselves now. Is that what concerns you? Lyra asked. What concerns me, Orion said, his voice low, is what happens after this war. If humanity prevails against the Vex, and I increasingly believe they will, what then? We've introduced a warrior species of unparalleled ferocity and ingenuity to the galactic stage. Have we simply replaced one existential threat with another? Niren had no answer. He could only watch as humanity armed itself for interstellar war with an efficiency and a single-minded determination that bordered on frightening. When the Vex Armada arrived at the edge of the solar system 3 weeks later, they expected to find a vulnerable, terrified planet protected by a handful of hastily constructed vessels. High Hierarch Zavik stood on the bridge of his flagship, the World Ender, confident in his overwhelming numerical and technological superiority. He had brought 87 of the Dominion's finest warships, a hammer of unimaginable power, to crush this nascent human threat. Instead, they encountered a fully operational Sentinel array, a colossal ring of alien metal now bristling with human-designed weapon emplacements that pulsed with raw power. And sheltering behind it, a fleet of nearly 60 human combat ships, formed not in a panicked defensive line, but in a predatory, aggressive posture. Colonel Chen stood on the bridge of the EDF Defiance, now battle-tested and upgraded with technology salvaged from the captured Vex ships at Hellas 4. Beside her, Captain Ibrahim commanded the Special Operations Contingent, his teams on standby in heavily armed boarding craft, prepared for any opportunity to take the fight directly to the enemy. Vex fleet has entered maximum sensor range, her tactical officer reported, his voice tight but steady. 87 vessels, matching known configurations from Celian intelligence. They are assuming standard assault formation. Chen nodded calmly, a flicker of a grim smile on her lips. Just as Rodriguez predicted. Commence Operation Haymaker. All vessels, execute pre-assigned maneuvers. Let's give them a welcome they won't forget. Instead of forming a static defensive line and waiting for the Vex to attack, as any sane, outnumbered fleet would do, the human fleet did the unexpected. It split. Smaller, highly mobile strike groups of 4 to 5 ships each broke formation and scattered. Before the alien armada could adjust their rigid approach, human vessels were already executing short, blindingly fast FTL jumps, appearing on the flanks of the Vex formation. They unleashed devastating volleys of kinetic slugs and missiles, targeting the command ships and communications relays that human and Celian intelligence analysts had identified as critical weaknesses. Then, just as quickly, they jumped away, leaving chaos in their wake. The Vex response was predictably rigid. Their fleet commanders, trained for centuries in tactics of overwhelming frontal assault, were thrown into disarray. Their orders were to advance and crush the primary target. These hit-and-run attacks were not in their tactical manuals. High Hierarch Zavik, watching his carefully planned, overwhelming assault disintegrate into a chaotic brawl, roared in frustration. They do not fight with honor, he raged, as another of his command vessels, the Iron Fist, erupted in a silent, blossoming fireball after its bridge was pierced by a tungsten rod traveling at a quarter of the speed of light. They strike and retreat like cowards. Form a defensive perimeter. Hunt them down. His tactical advisor, a more pragmatic Vex, saw the terrifying truth of the situation. They fight to win, High Hierarch, he hissed. And they are succeeding. The Sentinel array, which the Vex had initially dismissed as a mere static shield, then revealed its true purpose. Massive hatches along its ring opened, and colossal magnetic accelerators fired. Not energy beams, not missiles, but city block-sized asteroids, pulled from the nearby asteroid belt and wrapped in FTL fields to increase their mass. They were crude, brutal, and unbelievably effective. They smashed into the Vex capital ships, kinetic energy overwhelming their shields and tearing through their hulls like cannonballs through parchment. The battle for Earth lasted for 11 brutal, bloody hours. When it was over, the space around Earth was a graveyard of Vex ambition. 32 of their best ships had been destroyed, and 17 more were crippled and captured by Ibrahim's boarding teams. The remainder of the once proud armada retreated into emergency FTL, leaving behind the wreckage of their fleet and their shattered pride. Human casualties were significant. 14 vessels were lost and thousands of personnel were killed or wounded. But Earth remained secure. More importantly, the Vex Dominion had suffered its first major, undeniable defeat in centuries. The psychological impact rippled across the galaxy as news, disseminated by the Kelians, spread through subspace communications. Species that had bowed to Vex demands for generations suddenly found a spark of courage. Rebellions, once unthinkable, began to simmer on subjugated worlds. Others, long neutral and fearful, began to quietly offer resources and intelligence to the new human-Celian alliance. 3 months later, Commander Eva Rostova stood before the United Nations General Assembly, her crisp dress uniform now adorned with new medals she never wanted. "The war is not over," she cautioned the assembled delegates, her voice echoing in the hushed hall. "But the Vex are in retreat. 6 more Celian colonies have been liberated by joint human-Celian forces, and their home world, Salus Prime, is now secure. Our fleets, growing stronger and more advanced with each passing day, continue to push the front lines back from our solar system." Ambassador Lyra stepped forward to stand beside her, a symbol of the alliance that had changed the galaxy. "On behalf of all Celian people," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I extend our deepest, eternal gratitude. You answered our plea when no one else would. You fought for those you had never met. You risked your very world for a species not your own. This is a debt that can never be fully repaid." President Harrison nodded in acknowledgement, but his expression remained solemn as he addressed the assembly. "The question before us now is, what next? Do we continue this war until the Vex Dominion is completely defeated? Do we seek terms of peace? And beyond this conflict, what is humanity's role in a galaxy we now know to be filled with both wonders and threats?" Commander Rostova surveyed the assembly, seeing the same quiet determination in the eyes of the delegates that she felt in her own heart. "When the Celians came to Earth," she began, her voice resonating with a newfound authority, "they asked for help against an enemy they couldn't defeat alone. We gave them more than help. We brought total war to an aggressor that had never experienced true resistance. And in doing so, we discovered something profound about ourselves." She paused, her gaze meeting Ambassador Lyra's 4 golden eyes. "Humanity isn't just a warrior species. We are a species of protectors. We fight because we cannot abide tyranny, whether it is against ourselves or against others. The Vex threaten not just the Celians, but the very idea that all species have the right to freedom and self-determination. As long as that threat remains, humanity will stand against it. Let the galaxy know, if you come in peace, you will find no better friend or more steadfast ally than humanity. But if you come for war you will find no worse enemy." In the vast, cold darkness of interstellar space, aboard what remained of his once mighty flagship, High Hierarch Zavik reviewed yet another damage report, another story of defeat. The humans had proven to be not just capable warriors, but exceptional, diabolical strategists, turning the Vex's own rigid, honor-bound tactics against them at every turn. Worse, they had inspired resistance throughout the Dominion. Worlds that had been docile for centuries were now fighting back, using crude, human-taught guerrilla tactics. Perhaps, his most trusted advisor ventured cautiously, risking his leader's infamous wrath, "We should consider diplomatic options. The humans have shown a willingness to accept surrender from our routed forces." "Never," Zavik snarled, his razor-sharp claws digging into the arm of his command throne, gouging deep furrows into the metal. "The Dominion does not surrender. We will regroup. We will rebuild. We will return with overwhelming force and burn their world to ash." But even as he spoke, another urgent report arrived on his console. 3 more Vex outposts in the Orion Spur had fallen to joint human-Celian assault teams. And with it came a rumor, a terrifying rumor that was spreading faster than any fleet. A rumor that other subjugated species, the wolf-like Fenrir, the insectoid Silax, were now being actively trained in human combat techniques on secure Celian worlds. The humans were not just fighting a war, they were teaching the galaxy how to fight. They were spreading their fire. For the first time in his long, blood-soaked life, High Hierarch Zavik felt something cold and unfamiliar coiling in his gut. It was a feeling his species had inflicted on countless others, but had never experienced themselves. It was fear. The galaxy was changing, being reforged in the crucible of a war started by a species that had been unknown to the wider universe just a few short months before. A species that, when called upon for help, had not merely sent aid, but had brought the full, unrelenting fury of total war. The age of unchallenged Vex dominance was over. The age of humanity had just begun.